What would you do if you discovered the person you trusted most had been lying to you for years? Not just small lies, but life-changing ones. The kind that rewrites your entire past. Have you ever felt something was off in your relationship, even if you couldn't explain it? A late return home, a distracted smile, a moment where you wondered, is there something I don't know? In a quiet, middle-class suburb where couples waved from trimmed lawns and weekend barbecues were routine, Clara Bennett lived what many would call a stable life. Married for over a decade, her world revolved around her husband Marcus. To the outside world they were solid, reliable, familiar. But behind the walls of their ivy-covered home, something had shifted. Something Marcus never planned for Clara to find. And once she did, nothing would ever be the same. If stories like this intrigue you, hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping true crime cases. Clara always believed that loyalty was the foundation of everything. She built her life around that belief. She kept her home in order, honored her vows, and stood by Marcus through every challenge, never suspecting he was hiding a secret so large, it would split her reality in two. It started with subtle signs. Missed calls. Unexplained trips. Vague answers that didn't quite sit right. Clara tried to shake the doubts, told herself she was overthinking. After all, Marcus was her husband, her partner. But one night, when sleep wouldn't come and silence hung too heavily, she opened his laptop. What she found wasn't just evidence of a betrayal, it was proof that the life she thought she'd been living wasn't real at all. Documents. Emails. A birth certificate with Marcus's last name, and a child's name she'd never heard before. That night, Clara's world didn't just crack. It split wide open. The child's name was Noah. A boy Marcus had fathered during an affair years ago. A life he kept buried beneath excuses and business trips. Clara wasn't just betrayed, she was erased from a part of her husband's reality. And that kind of betrayal doesn't fade. It burns. As days passed, the pain twisted into something colder. Jealousy. Rage. A hunger for answers Marcus couldn't, or wouldn't, give her. And as Clara slipped further into her own thoughts, the line between heartbreak and resolve began to blur. In the town of Oakwood, where scandal was rare and quiet streets lulled people into a sense of safety, no one saw it coming. No one thought a woman like Clara Bennett was capable of killing her husband in his sleep. But she didn't just think about it, she planned it. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear will make you question how well you really know the ones closest to you. Oakwood was the kind of place where people knew their neighbors by name. Front yards were neatly trimmed, kids rode bikes until dinner, and nothing ever seemed out of place. It wasn't flashy, but it had rhythm, quiet, dependable, safe. Clara Bennett had always found comfort in that rhythm. She organized block parties, sent handwritten holiday cards, and remembered the names of everyone's children. She didn't just live in the neighborhood, she helped shape it. Her home was a reflection of the order she valued. Spotless floors, warm meals, fresh flowers every Friday. To those who knew her, Clara had built the life most people envied, stable, committed, admired. Her husband Marcus, a financial advisor, was steady, professional, well-liked at local functions. Together, they were the couple others held up as an example. But Clara had started to notice changes. Subtle at first. Late meetings. Missed calls. The occasional business trip that didn't line up with the calendar. He'd always been attentive, but lately, his attention seemed to wander. She told herself he was stressed, that work had become more demanding. Still, there was something in his voice, guarded. Something in his smile, forced. She searched for reasons to dismiss the shift. After all, marriages went through phases. Maybe they just needed a weekend away. Maybe they were both tired. But the doubts didn't leave. They waited in the quiet moments, at the kitchen sink, folding laundry, lying in bed beside a man who had started to feel distant. Marcus still said the right things. He still kissed Clara goodbye in the mornings, complimented her roast chicken, and remembered their anniversary. But there was a delay now, like his thoughts were somewhere else. His phone never left his side, and if it chimed after dinner, he'd step outside to take the call. When she asked who it was, the answer was always the same: a client. Nothing serious. She wanted to believe him. She tried. She reminded herself of the man who once drove across state lines just to bring her a scarf she'd forgotten on a snowy trip. That man had looked her in the eyes when he spoke. He didn't rush through conversations or flinch when she asked about his day. Still, Clara said nothing. She convinced herself that loyalty meant patience. That whatever was causing the shift would pass if she just held the line. She kept smiling at neighborhood barbecues, kept making his coffee just how he liked it. She pretended not to notice when he came home later than usual, when his cologne lingered stronger than it should have after a so-called client dinner. But each unasked question left a dent. Each silent night chipped at her resolve. Something was off. She knew it. Her instincts whispered it long before the truth surfaced. But she loved him. And love has a way of quieting the very voice you should be listening to. The house was still. Marcus had gone to bed hours earlier, claiming exhaustion after another late client dinner. Clara sat on the edge of the couch, staring at nothing in particular, her robe tied loosely, a cup of tea long gone cold in her hand. She hadn't spoken in hours. The television was off. Her phone untouched. Sleep wouldn't come, not when her mind kept circling the same track. Something didn't add up. It hadn't for a while. Her eyes drifted to Marcus's laptop, left on the kitchen counter. Normally she wouldn't have touched it. She respected boundaries, privacy. But tonight those boundaries felt different. Bent if not already broken. Her hand moved before she had fully decided. She opened it. No password. He must have forgotten to log out. A few documents sat open from earlier in the day, financial spreadsheets, a presentation draft. Nothing unusual. But then she saw it. A folder buried in the documents drive, out of place among his polished files. It was labeled with a single word, family. She clicked it. At first it was just digital clutter, scan letters, receipts. But then came the photograph. A boy no older than 5, smiling in the arms of a woman Clara didn't recognize. The child's features caught her immediately, his eyes, the shape of his face. It hit her like a blow. He looked like Marcus. Clara froze, heart pounding, breath shallow. She clicked faster now, opening files, scanning documents. A birth certificate. The father's name, Marcus Anthony Bennett. No mistake. Her hands trembled as she found emails, years of them, between Marcus and a woman named Lydia. Mentions of our son, holiday visits, child support arrangements. She sat back, barely able to breathe. Her marriage hadn't just shifted. It had been built on a lie. Clara stared at the screen, waiting for some other explanation to appear. Something that would make this all make sense. But it didn't come. It was real. The child was real. The affair had happened. The cover-up wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a decision that had spanned years. A decision that had cut her out of an entire part of her husband's life. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't wipe them away. She just sat there, breathing through her teeth, each exhale shorter than the last. Her hands curled into fists as she read the emails again. Lines about birthdays, doctor's appointments, Lydia thanking Marcus for the gifts. There were no apologies. No regret. Just updates. As if it were all perfectly reasonable to keep hidden from the woman he shared a bed with. Her thoughts turned. The nights he said he was working late. The mornings he left without a kiss. Every skipped conversation. Every unanswered question. It hadn't been stress. It hadn't been burnout. It was guilt. She looked down at her wedding ring. Everything she believed she had with Marcus, loyalty, honesty, partnership, collapsed in that moment. The foundation wasn't cracked. It had never existed. A boy named Noah. A woman named Lydia. A double life built in plain sight, protected by Clara's trust and her refusal to question too much. She closed the laptop slowly, her hands cold. Her face was wet, but her expression had hardened. This wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. A private shame no one else knew about. Not yet. What would you do if you found out your partner had hidden an entire child from you? Comment below, we want to hear your thoughts. The days that followed were hollow. Clara moved through them, but she wasn't really present. She answered the door when neighbors stopped by, nodded through conversations and kept the house running. But her mind was locked somewhere else, replaying each email, each file, every look Marcus had ever given her that now felt dishonest. At night, sleep refused to come. She would pace the hallway with bare feet, the silence in the house so heavy it almost echoed. Sometimes she stood at the foot of the bed just watching him sleep, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wondering how he could be so calm with so much to hide. That's when the journaling began. It started with a single entry, just thoughts she needed to release. But by the end of the week, she had filled an entire notebook. Her handwriting shifted from neat and centered to frantic and jagged. Each page documented her questions, her doubts, her fury. She wrote about Noah, about Lydia, about every memory now reshaped by what she knew. She stopped cooking, stopped answering calls. Marcus noticed the change, but every time he asked what was wrong, she brushed it off. "I'm tired," she would say. Just tired. But tired didn't cover it. She was worn thin by secrets she hadn't chosen, consumed by the images that wouldn't leave her mind, The smiling boy in the photograph, the woman holding him, the warmth on Marcus's face in those pictures. Something she hadn't seen from him in years. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was obsession. Clara began searching for them, Lydia and the child. She started on social media, combing through profiles, studying photos, captions, friend lists. She found an account that matched Lydia's name, then another with the child's photo from the documents. The timeline matched. So did the boy's birthday. She didn't message. She didn't comment. She just watched. Quietly. Obsessively. Every night, she returned to her journal, each entry darker than the last. The pages no longer read like reflections. They read like records, itemized observations, timelines, questions without answers. She logged Marcus's movements, noted phone calls, wrote down anything she could tie to the deception. Some nights, she wondered if confrontation could fix it. Could she forgive him? Could they rebuild what they had? Other nights, the thought vanished as quickly as it came. She saw his betrayal not just as personal but as calculated, like he had chosen this other life deliberately, carving her out of it with full awareness. The journal transformed into something else. It stopped being about healing. It started to look like preparation. Marcus remained unaware. He still asked if she was okay, still kissed her cheek, still left his shoes by the door like everything was fine. But Clara wasn't trying to fix things anymore. She was documenting a life that had already ended. Only one part remained unfinished. The storm hit just after midnight. Thunder rolled in slow waves as rain tapped against the windows. The street outside was washed in streaks of orange light from the few working lampposts. Clara stood by the window for a long time, her arms crossed, the journal tucked under one hand. She had planned to wait, to gather more, to decide with a clear mind. But something shifted that night. The silence in the house felt heavy. Marcus was home. He'd fallen asleep on the couch in front of the TV, tie loosened, shoes off, a half-finished drink still on the coffee table. She watched him for a few seconds before speaking. "Marcus." He stirred, eyes opening slowly. "Oh, I know." He blinked. "What?" "I know about Noah. I know about Lydia. I saw the emails, the photos, the birth certificate, all of it." He sat up, sudden and alert. His face went pale, the words catching in his throat. "Clara, listen, I can explain." "No," she cut him off, voice low but shaking. Don't insult me with excuses. 10 years, Marcus. 10 years of our life. Were you ever going to tell me?" He rubbed his hands over his face, then through his hair, searching for an answer he didn't have. "It was a mistake. A long time ago. I didn't want to lose you." Clara stepped closer. "You already did. The moment you decided to keep a child hidden like some shameful secret." He opened his mouth again, but she didn't give him the chance. "You made me a fool. I was loyal to a man who spent a decade lying straight to my face." Marcus stood, hands slightly raised, not in defense but like he was trying to hold the moment still. "I didn't plan for any of this," he said. "It was one mistake. I thought if I kept it separate I could protect what we had." Clara laughed, dry and bitter. "Protect what?" "The version of us that only existed in your head." He reached for her but she stepped back. "All those nights I asked where you were, all the times you looked me in the eye and said everything was fine. You let me believe I was crazy for doubting you. I didn't want to hurt you," he said quietly. "You did anyway." The room was quiet except for the ticking wall clock and the rain hammering against the windows. She looked at him, really looked. The man who had shared her home, her life, her future. But now, his face was just a mask she didn't recognize. She felt nothing. No more confusion. No more hope. Just certainty. "You had a child with another woman. You lived 2 lives. And you let me play house while you slipped out the back door to visit your other one." Marcus dropped his gaze. She shook her head slowly, tears now trailing down her cheeks. "I don't know who you are anymore," she whispered. "And I don't think I ever did." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving him standing there. She didn't slam the door. She didn't raise her voice again. There was no need. She had said everything that mattered. If you're still watching, thank you. These stories matter. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. It was 4:12 a.m. The house was silent except for the rain tapping against the windows. Marcus lay in bed, turned to one side, his breathing slow and steady. The television downstairs was off. The lights were out. But Clara was awake. She stood barefoot in the hallway, wrapped in her robe. Her hands hung loosely by her sides. She hadn't slept. Not since the argument. Not since hearing Marcus say the words that confirmed every doubt she tried to bury. She walked quietly to the kitchen. No hesitation. No second thoughts. The drawer opened without a sound. She reached for the knife, the long one, stainless steel, sharp. It was the one she'd used 1,000 times before, slicing vegetables, carving meat. The same knife that had served ordinary meals in an ordinary home. Now it had another purpose. She returned to the bedroom with the knife at her side. Her breath was steady. Her steps quiet. Rain continued to fall outside, muted through thick glass. Clara stood over Marcus for a moment, just watching. He didn't move. He had no idea. No idea that the woman standing over him wasn't the same one who had once planned their anniversary dinners or ironed his shirts or smiled at his jokes. That woman had been buried days ago, smothered beneath years of lies and a single irreversible truth. Clara raised the knife with both hands. No shaking. No sound. And in one sharp, controlled motion she brought it down. The first strike landed just below the collarbone. Marcus gasped, but it didn't turn into a scream. His eyes shot open, confusion giving way to terror. He tried to lift his arm, but she was already on her second movement, precise, forceful, unhesitating. Blood soaked through the sheets, the sound of it muffled by cotton and the dull thud of impact. He tried to speak, but the words didn't come. Just a weak gurgle as his limbs failed him. Clara said nothing. Each motion was deliberate, focused. Her face was blank, not blank from rage or passion, but from detachment. She wasn't lost in emotion. She was finished with it. By the fifth strike he stopped moving. His body lay still, chest rising no more. The storm outside carried on as if nothing had happened. The only evidence inside the house was the knife in her hand, the warmth slipping from his body, and the deep red seeping through the mattress. She dropped the weapon beside the bed. Clara stood there, breathing evenly. There were no tears, no gasps, no panic, just quiet. She walked to the bathroom sink and washed her hands. The water ran red for a moment, then cleared. She dried her fingers on a towel and turned off the light. Returning to the bedroom, she looked once more at what was left of Marcus. His eyes were open but empty now. Clara sat in the nearby chair, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. The house, once filled with routines and distractions, had reached complete silence. The 911 call came from a neighbor who noticed Clara sitting motionless on her front steps at sunrise. Her clothes were damp from the morning rain, her face expressionless. When officers arrived, she didn't resist. She didn't speak. She simply pointed toward the house and whispered, "He's inside." The scene they entered was calm but unmistakably violent. Marcus Bennett was found in the master bedroom, lying on his back, surrounded by blood-soaked bedding. His eyes were open. The knife lay beside the bed, undisturbed. There were no signs of forced entry. No sign of a struggle. Nothing was stolen. No broken windows. No damaged locks. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was something else entirely. Detectives noticed the placement of everything, the clean-cut approach, the lack of chaos. It was calculated. Not rushed. Not improvised. The wounds were consistent, almost methodical. Nothing about the scene pointed to impulse. Downstairs, Clara's journal sat on the kitchen table. At first glance, it looked like any ordinary notebook. But as they flipped through it, they realized it was anything but ordinary. Page after page documented not just Clara's thoughts, but a timeline, a process. Her notes tracked Marcus's behavior, interactions, phone calls, locations. Some pages were simply dates with angry lines scratched beneath them. Others were filled with dense paragraphs, raw, personal, and increasingly disturbing. The diary didn't just reveal motive. It showed preparation. Later that day, they pulled surveillance footage from a street camera 2 blocks away. At 3:47 a.m., Clara's car rolled quietly into the driveway. No lights on. No one else in the vehicle. Just her, returning home after what would become the most tragic night Oakwood had seen in years. Neighbors described Clara as quiet in the days leading up to the incident, present but distant. One recalled seeing her on her porch at odd hours, sitting in complete stillness. Another mentioned hearing raised voices during a recent thunderstorm but didn't think much of it. They were always private, one neighbor told investigators. But lately she looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. There had been no police reports. No history of domestic violence. No documented signs of trouble in the marriage. That made it harder to process, harder to accept. But the journal filled in the blanks. It painted the emotional deterioration of a woman who had once been the model of composure. It revealed betrayal, shame, and eventually a resolve that hardened into something irreversible. Each entry chipped away at the image Clara once presented to the world. By the time she reached the final pages, the voice in the writing had shifted entirely, less confused, more resolved. Detectives also learned that Clara had never confronted Lydia. Not once. She hadn't called her, emailed her, or reached out through any known channel. Her focus was entirely on Marcus. The deception had taken root inside their home, and that's where it ended. Forensic psychologists later referred to the journal as a window into a mind that had moved past grief and landed on one conclusion: that the man she loved had destroyed her, and there was no repairing what he'd taken. The public didn't know what to do with Clara Bennett. They had known her as warm, graceful, dependable. But the truth was now inked into reports, logged into evidence, and whispered across front yards. The mystery wasn't how the murder happened. The question was how she got there. The story didn't stay in Oakwood. Within hours of Clara's arrest, headlines spread across news outlets and social media platforms. The details were too shocking to ignore. A respected woman, a secret child, and a fatal betrayal that ended in silence and blood. Cable networks ran back-to-back segments. Talk shows dissected motives and marriage dynamics. Newspapers used bold lettering: "Wife discovers husband's double life, takes justice into her own hands." Some stories leaned toward empathy, others painted her as calculated and unforgiving. The contrast only added fuel to the discussion. But while the media roared, Clara remained quiet. Her arrest wasn't dramatic. No handcuffs on the lawn. No shouting. She walked to the patrol car without resistance, hands steady, face unreadable. To those watching, she looked less like a criminal and more like someone who had nothing left to protect. In court, Clara wore a navy blue sweater and slacks. No makeup. Hair tied back. She sat still during opening statements, her eyes fixed forward. When she spoke, it was only to confirm details or respond to the judge. The defense painted a portrait of emotional breakdown. The prosecution argued intent. Her journal became the focal point. Each entry read aloud in court pulled the tension tighter. Some jurors avoided eye contact. Others couldn't look away. The entries didn't just reveal pain. They showed planning, timelines, and a clear shift from heartbreak to decision. Outside the courthouse, people debated endlessly. Was Clara a victim of betrayal pushed too far, or someone who made herself judge and executioner? Opinion pieces flooded in. Psychologists were interviewed. Legal analysts weighed in. Some blamed Marcus for the years of deceit. Others argued that betrayal never justifies bloodshed. The town of Oakwood watched quietly, no longer speaking about weekend events or summer plans. Their attention had turned to something heavier, something that forced uncomfortable questions. Do you think Clara deserves sympathy or justice? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and share if this story shook you. Long after the trial ended, the conversations didn't stop. The courtroom verdict may have brought legal closure, but the emotional wreckage extended well beyond Clara and Marcus. Families on both sides were left to process what had happened. Not just the violence but everything that led up to it. Marcus's relatives struggled with conflicting emotions. They had lost a son, a brother, a father. But they also had to face the truth. Marcus had lived a life that none of them fully knew. His failure to confront his past had set a chain of events in motion that no one could undo. Clara's family, once proud of her devotion and loyalty, found themselves torn. They remembered the woman who once decorated her home for every holiday, who never missed a family birthday, who used to smile with her entire face. Now they spoke about her in quieter tones, unsure where to place their sadness, their anger, or their sympathy. At the heart of the wreckage was Noah, the boy who never asked to be hidden, never asked to be the center of a family collapse. He remained with his mother, Lydia, now burdened with more than just the role of caretaker. She carried the weight of secrecy, guilt, and headlines she never wanted to be part of. Noah would grow up with questions, some that might never be answered. In academic circles, the case became a point of reference. It was used in discussions about emotional suppression, identity deception, and the psychological tipping point between betrayal and retaliation. Some viewed Clara as a tragic example of emotional isolation. Others used her story as a case study in premeditated response. But in Oakwood, people remembered her differently. Not as a lesson, not as a theory. They remembered a woman who used to plant flowers outside her door every spring. A woman who, when spoken to kindly, always responded with warmth. And a woman who, after one night, would never be seen the same way again. Clara Bennett's story isn't just about a murder. It's about silence. It's about the quiet, slow erosion of trust, and the damage it causes when left to grow unchecked. It's about the decisions people make in secret, and the consequences that surface when those secrets refuse to stay hidden. Marcus built a second life without honesty. Clara responded in a way that destroyed both of theirs. The outcome wasn't just one death, it was the collapse of everything they'd once shared, and the scattering of everyone left behind. This case leaves behind more than evidence and headlines. It raises questions. How far can emotional pain push someone before they break? Is betrayal ever a defense? And when someone you love lies for years, what happens to the version of yourself that trusted them? In the end, there were no winners. Just a boy growing up in the shadow of choices made long before he could understand them. Just a community that watched a familiar life come undone overnight. Just a woman once admired, now remembered for what she couldn't walk away from. Let this be a reminder. Secrets don't disappear. They wait. And when they surface, they don't knock. They crash. Years after Clara Bennett was sentenced, her name still lingered in discussions well beyond Oakwood. It wasn't just the crime that kept people talking. It was everything the case revealed about the human condition. At the center was Noah. He hadn't asked for any of it. Not the secrecy. Not the silence. Not the burden of knowing his existence played a role in something he couldn't control. He would grow up knowing his father was killed by the woman who might have once welcomed him, had the truth been handled differently. For Noah, the weight of that story would follow him into adulthood, shaping relationships, trust, and identity in ways no child should have to manage. Marcus had believed he could manage both lives, keep order in one while hiding the other. But his refusal to face the consequences of his actions didn't protect anyone. It only guaranteed that when everything collapsed, it would do so completely. His mistake wasn't just the affair, it was the decision to stay silent afterward. That silence didn't keep peace. It fractured it. Clara, once respected for her commitment to marriage, became a symbol of emotional implosion. Her life had been structured, purposeful, and outwardly composed. But when that structure cracked, she didn't ask for help. She didn't leave. She planned. The woman who once baked for neighbors and hosted fundraisers was now remembered through mugshots and courtroom transcripts. Psychologists who studied the case highlighted key failures: emotional suppression, absence of communication, and unchecked resentment. Clara's journal revealed a mind that never found space to heal. She wrote when she couldn't speak. She planned when she couldn't move forward. The public wanted someone to blame. Some pointed to Marcus. Others condemned Clara. But experts pointed to something more complicated. A system of silence that allowed damage to spread quietly until there was no path back. What remained was a family name marked by tragedy. One man gone. One woman imprisoned. And one child left with questions he didn't deserve. Clara Bennett's story didn't begin with violence. It began with silence. With words left unsaid. With choices made in private, under the assumption that they would never come to light. But silence doesn't cancel consequence, it only delays it. Marcus believed he could separate his mistake from his marriage. That one secret kept long enough would lose its weight. But the truth doesn't disappear. It waits. When Clara finally learned what had been hidden, the impact didn't show up in a single outburst, it came slowly. Through sleepless nights, quiet withdrawals, and a mind that no longer trusted what it once knew. This case isn't just about crime. It's about erosion. The slow breakdown of truth, communication, and emotional connection. It reminds us that trust, once broken, rarely returns in the same shape. And it's a warning about how quickly love can turn when honesty leaves the room. Sometimes the deadliest betrayals aren't shouted, but whispered in silence over the years. Families watch this unfold from a distance, but the lesson it leaves is painfully close to home. Speak early. Confront pain before it grows roots. Because when deception festers in the dark, the damage it causes can't always be undone. The truth always comes out. The question is, who survives when it does?